He had sworn love was a luxury he'd never afford again. But fate has a way of rewriting even the most carefully drafted contracts. The city woke before sunrise, but Ray Donovan had been awake long before it. The top floor of the Donovan Tower was silent, except for the distant hum of Manhattan and the soft ticking of the watch his late wife had given him. He kept it beside his bed like a relic. Worn leather strap, faint scratch on the face where she dropped it once while laughing. He hadn't heard laughter in these halls for 3 years. Ray moved through the penthouse the way he ran his company. Precisely. Coffee poured at 6 a.m., 3 cubes of sugar, black suit, no tie. The floor-to-ceiling windows stretched across a skyline that sparkled with life he didn't feel. His assistant, Mara, arrived early as always. "Your 9 a.m. meeting with the research board is confirmed," she said, laying the folder on the marble counter. Ray nodded without looking. "And the surrogate applications?" "They're filtered down to 3. Backgrounds, medical, psych evals. All clean. You just need to choose." He flipped through the files mechanically. Each woman was reduced to statistics: blood type, fertility history, education level. It was business, nothing more. That's what he told himself. One name made him pause. Cassie Monroe, 27, registered nurse. No criminal record. Primary caregiver to an ill sibling. Her photo wasn't professional, just a simple candid. Her hair pulled into a messy bun, eyes tired but bright. He closed the folder quickly, annoyed by the slight warmth spreading in his chest. Across the river, Cassie stood outside the worn brick building she and her younger brother, Noah, called home. A call from inside the apartment reminded her why she was rushing. She pushed open the door, balancing a bag of groceries that would barely last a week. "Morning, Nurse Monroe," the old neighbor called as she passed. "Morning, Mrs. Peterson," Cassie replied with a smile she didn't feel. Inside, Noah sat on the couch wrapped in a blanket, inhaler in hand. "Did you get the medicine?" he asked. "Half of it," she admitted softly, placing the bottle on the table. "I'll pick up the rest after my shift." She wanted to give him more medicine, more comfort, more life, but nursing shifts barely covered rent. That night at the hospital, a colleague slid a tablet across the counter. "Look at this, Cassie. Private surrogacy agency. They pay more than triple the normal rate. 1 successful pregnancy, and you could wipe out your debts." Cassie laughed at first. "I'm not selling myself." "It's not selling," her friend said. "It's giving someone a chance to be a parent." Later, during her break, she read the listing again. Seeking healthy surrogate for confidential client. Generous compensation. Full medical support. She imagined Noah breathing easily, a stable home, maybe finishing school again. That night, she filled out the form. She hesitated at the line marked motivation. Her fingers trembled, then typed, "To help someone start a family, and maybe rebuild my own life in the process." 2 days later, Ray sat across from Dr. Lynn, the fertility specialist, reviewing candidates. "This one," Lynn said, pointing at Cassie's file, "meets every criterion. Emotionally stable, compassionate, motivated for the right reasons." Ray studied her picture again, those honest eyes. "She's young," he muttered. "Old enough to understand what she's doing," Lynn replied. "You could meet her before making a decision." Ray hesitated. Meetings were unnecessary. This was supposed to be transactional. But curiosity tugged at him, a dangerous thing for a man who'd spent years burying curiosity under control. "Fine," he said. "Set it up. 1 meeting." Cassie spent the next evening pacing her small apartment. The contract email opened on her screen. The name Ray Donovan echoed in her mind. Everyone knew the Donovan name. Billionaire investor, tech visionary, philanthropist. Why would someone like him need a surrogate? She pressed her palms together, whispering a prayer for courage. In the cracked mirror, she barely recognized herself in borrowed heels and the only clean blazer she owned. "You're just there to talk," she told her reflection. "Just a conversation." But her heart refused. The Donovan Tower's lobby was all glass and chrome, a reflection of wealth she'd never imagined. The receptionist guided her to a private elevator. When the doors opened, Ray was already there, tall, composed, eyes the color of storms over steel. "Miss Monroe," he greeted, his voice low and measured. "Mr. Donovan," she replied, her voice softer than she intended. They sat across from each other in his office, the city glowing behind him. He expected rehearsed answers. Instead, she spoke plainly. "I became a nurse to help people, but lately I feel like I'm just patching holes in lives I can't fix. Maybe this is one way I can actually make a difference." Ray studied her, unsettled. There was no pretense, no performance, just sincerity. "And the money?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "It would change everything for my brother. But that's not the only reason." Something in her tone, honesty without pity, cracked his practiced detachment. After an hour, the meeting ended with a handshake. Her fingers were warm. His lingered a second too long. As she left, she glanced back once. Their eyes met through the glass wall. Hers full of nerves, his full of something he couldn't name. When the elevator doors closed, Ray exhaled for the first time all day. That night, Ray stood by the piano in his dim living room, fingers hovering over the keys he hadn't touched since the funeral. He heard her voice in his mind, steady, kind, real. For the first time in years, the silence around him felt different. Cassie, on the subway ride home, replayed his eyes and her thoughts. How loneliness had looked powerful on him. She whispered to herself, "You're not supposed to care. Don't start caring." Neither knew that a single signature would bind their hearts more tightly than any contract could. If you were in Cassie's place, offered a chance to change your life by helping a stranger, would you take it, even if it meant risking your heart? Tell us in the comments. What would you choose, security or emotional safety? He had only meant to shake her hand. He didn't expect the warmth to stay long after she'd gone. A week later, Ray sat in the glass conference room, contract folder open, fountain pen poised. Across from him, Cassie adjusted her blazer, trying not to fidget. Every word on that paper felt heavier than ink. It was a promise written in medical and legal jargon. But underneath it all, it was a story waiting to begin. Ray cleared his throat. "Everything has been reviewed by your lawyer?" "Yes," she said softly. "It's a lot to take in." "Understandable," he replied. "If you need more time—" "No," she interrupted gently. "I'm ready." Her voice was steady, but her fingers trembled slightly as she signed. Ray's gaze followed the movement, surprised by the protective instinct rising in him. When he signed his own name, it felt less like a contract and more like a confession. "You're letting someone in?" They stood. The lawyer excused himself. Silence hung like glass between them. Cassie smiled faintly. "I guess this makes us partners of a sort." Ray's lips curved, a small, unfamiliar smile. In a very unconventional business. Something softened between them. A tension, not a discomfort, but recognition. Like two souls remembering each other from a dream. Dr. Lynn's office smelled faintly of antiseptic and roses. Cassie sat on the edge of the examination table while Ray stood nearby, pretending to check his phone but really watching her. He noticed how her hands were folded neatly in her lap, how she bit her lip when nervous. "This procedure will be straightforward," Dr. Lynn said. "You'll be under mild sedation and we'll monitor closely." Ray's jaw tightened. He'd been in hospitals enough to know how fragile control could be. When Cassie glanced up and saw his expression, she offered a reassuring smile. "I'll be fine, Mr. Donovan." "Ray," he corrected quietly. She blinked. "What?" "My name. Call me Ray." It was such a simple thing, but it landed like a confession. After the procedure, Ray waited outside the recovery room, pacing. He didn't understand why he couldn't just leave. This wasn't supposed to be personal. But when the nurse finally said she's awake, he was at her side in seconds. Cassie looked drowsy but peaceful. Did it work? "We won't know for a few days," Dr. Lynn said. But everything went smoothly. Ray let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Cassie opened her eyes fully and met his gaze. "You stayed." He shrugged awkwardly. Seemed appropriate. Her lips twitched. "You don't strike me as a man who does anything he doesn't have to." He smiled faintly. "Maybe I'm trying something new." That made her laugh, a sound that startled him with its warmth. It had been years since anyone had laughed near him without hesitation. The The next week passed with messages from doctors and assistants, updates and check-ins. But Ray found himself composing texts he never sent. How are you feeling? Did you eat? He deleted them every time. Cassie, meanwhile, lay awake each night, staring at the ceiling of her tiny apartment. She kept remembering the way his eyes softened when he thought she wasn't looking. He was her employer, not her friend. But something in his voice, low, measured, careful, made her feel seen for the first time in years. When the test came back positive, she was too stunned to speak. She sent one text. It worked. Ray replied within a minute. Thank you, Cassie. Then a pause, followed by, are you okay? She smiled at the screen. Just 2 words, but they felt like something deeper, an unexpected visit. 2 days later, Cassie found him waiting at the clinic for first ultrasound. You didn't have to come, she said, startled. I wanted to, Ray replied. This is important. As the technician moved the wand across her abdomen, a soft sound filled the room, the faint, rapid heartbeat of new life. Cassie's eyes filled with tears. Ray's breath caught. He hadn't expected it to hit this hard. The sound of something so small, yet powerful enough to shake the walls around his heart. Everything looks perfect, the technician said. When they left, neither spoke for a long while. Outside, the sky was bruised with rain clouds. Finally, Cassie said, You should be happy. You're going to be a father. Ray looked at her, the wind tugging at his tie, his voice quiet. I haven't let myself feel happy in a long time. She tilted her head. Maybe it's time you did. It started to drizzle as they reached the car. Ray reached for his coat pocket, pulling out an umbrella. Come on, he said, opening it over her. You don't have to. It's fine. They walked side by side through the rain toward her cab. When she slipped on the curb, his hand shot out, steadying her. For a moment, their fingers intertwined. Unplanned, electric. Cassie looked up, eyes wide. Ray didn't move. The city noise faded until there was only their breathing. Then gently he released her hand. You should get home, he said softly. She nodded, stepping into the cab, the scent of rain and his cologne clinging to her like memory. That night, Ray stood by his window again, the skyline a smear of lights against the rain. He should have been celebrating the success of the procedure, his legacy secured, his plan fulfilled. But all he could think of was her laugh, her eyes when she heard that heartbeat. Cassie sat at her kitchen table, a cup of chamomile tea growing cold. She kept replaying the moment his hand steadied her, the warmth in his voice when he said her name. She told herself it was hormones. It wasn't. It was the first spark of something terrifyingly real. Neither of them knew it, but the line between business and emotion had already been crossed. Do you believe that love can start with silence? A look, a gesture, a heartbeat? Comment below. Have you ever felt a connection you couldn't explain? She told herself it was hormones. He told himself it was gratitude. Both were lying. The weeks after the ultrasound blurred into a strange rhythm of checkups, messages, and meetings that felt less like business and more like unacknowledged ritual. Every Tuesday at 9, Ray was there. He always arrived early, always brought coffee, and always tried not to notice how his pulse changed when Cassie walked into the room. She'd smile politely, one hand on her growing belly, and say, You don't have to come every time. I want to stay informed. He'd reply evenly, though the truth was simpler. He needed to see her. One morning, as sunlight streamed to the clinic window, he caught himself staring too long, memorizing the way light framed her hair. Cassie noticed. Something wrong? She asked. Ray blinked. No, just thinking. About the baby? He hesitated. Something like that. She smiled gently, but inside, she felt a tug she didn't want to name. Boundaries. Later that week, Mara, Ray's assistant, cornered him in the office. Ray, may I be blunt? He looked up from his laptop. You always are. You're spending too much time at the clinic. The board is starting to whisper. He exhaled, pinching the bridge of his nose. Let them whisper. This isn't like you, she pressed. This isn't business, it's personal. Her words struck harder than he let show. After she left, he sat alone, staring out at the skyline. She was right. He'd cross a line, and he didn't know how to step back. That night, he drafted an email to Cassie. From now on, Dr. Lin will handle all communications directly. He read it 5 times, then deleted it. Cassie's walls. Cassie noticed his withdrawal immediately. His messages grew shorter, his visits rarer. She told herself it was for the best. She'd entered this arrangement to survive, not to feel. But late at night, she'd place her hand on her belly and whisper, "Your dad's stubborn, you know that?" She laughed softly, then felt a sting of sadness. At the hospital where she worked, her friend Mia caught her daydreaming. "You've got that look," Mia teased. "What look?" "The I'm trying not to fall for someone but failing spectacularly look." Cassie flushed. "Don't be ridiculous." Mia grinned. "You're glowing, Cass. Just admit it." Cassie sighed. "He's different. Kind but guarded, like he's afraid to breathe too deeply." "Maybe he just needs someone to remind him how," Mia said. Cassie smiled faintly but shook her head. "He doesn't need that from me." 2 months into the pregnancy, Ray called unexpectedly. "I know it's not part of the agreement," he began, voice lower than usual. "But would you have dinner with me?" Cassie hesitated. "Dinner?" "Just talk about the next phase of care." "Right," she said, knowing that wasn't the real reason. "Sure." He took her to a quiet restaurant overlooking the river. The conversation started formal. Doctor's updates, health reports. But slowly, laughter slipped in. When she described how Noah tried to fix a broken toaster with tape, Ray laughed, the sound surprising both of them. "I haven't laughed like that in years," he admitted softly. "Then maybe you were due," she said. For a moment, silence settled between them, not uncomfortable but charged. His hand brushed hers on the table, accidental but lingering. She froze. He withdrew instantly, guilt flashing across his face. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "Don't be," she whispered. But afterward, on the drive home, she stared out the window, heart pounding, telling herself it couldn't happen. It mustn't happen. A few days later, a small package arrived at Cassie's apartment. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a charm shaped like a tiny heartbeat. No note, just the quiet meaning of it. She knew it was from him. Her first instinct was to return it. She even wrapped it again and set it by the door. But every time she passed it, her chest tightened. That night, she put it on. "Just until tomorrow," she whispered. But tomorrow never came. Ray couldn't focus. Meetings blurred, numbers lost meaning. He found himself replaying the sound of her laughter, the way she looked under the restaurant lights. He told himself he admired her strength, her compassion. But deep down he knew it was more. It was the quiet way she made space in his silence. He went to his late wife's photo, resting on the piano. "You'd hate this, wouldn't you?" he whispered bitterly. But as he looked closer, he could almost hear her voice, soft and kind. "Ray, you're still alive. Don't forget to live." He sank onto the piano bench and pressed one key. Just one. The sound echoed like forgiveness. By the end of the second trimester, Cassie's belly had rounded gently. She walked slower now, hands often resting protectively over it. Ray insisted on driving her to appointments, though he called it efficiency. On one such drive, she broke the silence. "You don't have to take care of me," she said quietly. "I know." "Then why do you?" He looked at her, then back at the road. "Because I want to." It was the wrong answer, and the truest one. She turned to the window, blinking back tears. "This isn't supposed to get complicated." He smiled faintly. When has life ever listened to rules? That night, neither of them slept. Ray stood by his window again, city lights flickering like restless thoughts. Cassie lay in bed, her hand tracing the bracelet on her wrist, wondering if she should take it off before it was too late. Somewhere between midnight and morning, both whispered the same word into the dark: stop. But neither could. If your heart started falling for someone you shouldn't love, someone bound to you by circumstance, would you fight it or let it happen? Comment below, is love a choice or does it choose us first? He told himself he wanted to protect her. He was lying again. It happened on an ordinary afternoon. Cassie was leaving her prenatal appointment when the world suddenly tilted. The hallway lights dimmed, and before she could call for help, her knees buckled. The nurse shouted for assistance. By the time Ray arrived, summoned by Dr. Lynn's urgent call, Cassie was lying pale and unconscious on the hospital bed. What happened? Ray demanded, breath sharp. Dehydration, exhaustion, Dr. Lynn said. She's pushing herself too hard. We're keeping her overnight. Ray's voice dropped. I want her transferred to my private wing. My staff will take care of her. That's not necessary, Dr. Lynn began, but Ray's tone left no room for debate. Do it. When Cassie woke, she was in a quiet, sunlit room. The sheets were soft. The air smelled faintly of cedar and jasmine. A nurse smiled beside her. You're safe, Miss Monroe. Mr. Donovan insisted you stay here until you're strong again. Her heart sank and fluttered all at once. Here, at his estate. Moments later, Ray appeared in the doorway. No suit today, just a dark sweater and tired eyes. Before you argue, he said gently. Dr. Lynn agreed. You need rest. Ray, I can't stay here. You fainted in a hospital hallway, Cassie. His tone was firm but warm. Let me help. She opened her mouth to protest, then stopped. There was no fight left in her. Just until I'm better, she murmured. He nodded. Just until then. But they both knew it would change everything. The first few days passed in uneasy silence. Cassie stayed mostly in bed, reading, while Ray worked in his study below. Yet the house no longer felt like the cold monument it had once been. There was laughter echoing faintly from the kitchen. His housekeeper, Nora, fussing over meals for Cassie. Sometimes Ray brought her tea in the evenings. You're not my nurse, she'd tease. No, he'd reply softly, setting the cup down. You're mine to take care of, though. The words hung between them like an accidental truth neither dared touch. One evening, she heard faint notes drifting from downstairs. A piano, hesitant and broken, curious. She padded quietly to the grand room. Ray sat at the piano, head bowed, fingers trembling on the keys. The melody stopped abruptly when he noticed her. I didn't mean to interrupt, she said. You didn't. His voice was barely above a whisper. It's been years since I played. Your wife? She asked softly. He nodded. She loved the song. What happened? He exhaled, the weight of memory heavy in his shoulders. Complications during childbirth. Neither of them survived. Cassie's throat tightened. I'm so sorry, Ray. He looked at her then, not as a billionaire, not as an employer, but as a man stripped bare. I thought having another child might fill the silence, he said quietly. But it's not about the child anymore. Not really. She took a hesitant step forward. Then what is it about? He smiled sadly, maybe remembering how to feel. For a long moment, neither moved. The piano's unfinished melody lingered in the air like an unanswered question. Nora insisted they eat together. Company's good for healing, she said. So, that night, Ray and Cassie sat across from each other in the dining room, candlelight soft against their faces. I feel ridiculous, Cassie said, gesturing to her robe. You probably have business dinners with people wearing diamonds, not pajamas. Ray chuckled. You'd be surprised how little diamonds sparkle when you don't care anymore. Her smile faded, replaced by a quiet curiosity. You really don't care? He leaned back, studying her. Once, everything I touched turned into an investment. Now I just want something that doesn't have a price tag. Their eyes met, and for the first time, she didn't look away. That night, rain began to fall, soft at first, then furious. Cassie couldn't sleep. She wandered into the living room, drawn to the sound of thunder. Ray was there, staring out the glass doors into storm. You're awake too, he said, voice low. I couldn't sleep. They stood side by side, watching the rain streak down the windows. Lightning flashed, revealing her reflection beside his. Two lonely figures, finally not alone. Do you ever miss her? Cassie asked. Every day, he said. But I think she wanted to stop grieving. Cassie's voice trembled. Maybe she wants you to remember how to love. He turned to her slowly, eyes searching. For a heartbeat, the air between them changed, warm, electric. Then, from a nursery upstairs, a framed sonogram photo clattered to the floor, breaking the spell. Cassie laughed nervously. Guess that's a sign. Maybe, he said, smiling softly. Maybe it's not. Days became gentler. She recovered, walking through the gardens in the mornings. He joined her sometimes, listening to her talk about Noah, about her dreams of studying literature, of writing someday. He found himself imagining her laughter echoing in these halls every morning. She found herself thinking his name when she closed her eyes at night. But neither said anything, because to speak it would make it real. And real was dangerous. One evening, they were watching a movie in the living room. Cassie dozed off halfway through, her head resting lightly against his shoulder. Ray froze, terrified to move, terrified not to. When she stirred and started to pull away, he whispered, "It's okay. You can stay." Her breath caught, her head resting back against him. Outside, the rain fell steady and soft. Inside, their silence said everything. The house was no longer haunted, just waiting. Cassie woke one morning to the soft scent of roses. On her nightstand sat a single white bloom and a folded note in Ray's careful handwriting. Meeting downtown. Back tonight. Don't overwork the baby or yourself. R. She smiled faintly, tracing the initials. Then, as she turned the paper over, another sheet fell out. Older, worn, the ink smudged. It wasn't meant for her. It was a letter, addressed to Clara. Her breath caught. Clara, his late wife. She hesitated, then read the first few lines. I should have been there. I should have stopped you from driving that night. They told me it wasn't my fault. But how can it not be when the last thing I said was, "We'll talk later"? The rest blurred as her tears fell. She stopped reading, hands trembling. When Ray returned that evening, he found her in the garden, the letter beside her. "I'm sorry," she whispered before he could speak. "I didn't mean to invade." He shook his head, voice tight. "You weren't supposed to see that." "I know." She hesitated. "But maybe you needed someone to." He looked at her then, raw, unguarded. "I told myself I wanted a surrogate because I couldn't face love again. The truth is, I just couldn't face my guilt." Cassie stepped closer, eyes full of compassion. "Ray, no one could have changed what happened." He gave a bitter laugh. "You sound like the therapist I fired." "I'm not a therapist." Her voice softened. "I just know what it's like to blame yourself for surviving." Later that night, sitting by the fire, Cassie shared her story. "When I was 19, she began quietly, I was engaged. We were in love, young, stupid. One night, he drove me home in the rain. We fought about something ridiculous. I told him to stop the car and let me walk." She swallowed hard. A truck hit him 2 miles later. I never saw him again. Ray's eyes widened with pain that wasn't his, but felt like it. "You've been carrying that all this time?" She nodded. "Every day. That's why I took the surrogacy. I thought maybe giving life could balance the scale somehow." For a long time, neither spoke. The fire crackled softly, their confessions hovering between them like ghosts finally set free. Later that week, Cassie found Ray at the piano once more. Without a word, she sat beside him. "Play it," she said softly. "For her. For yourself." He hesitated, then began the same unfinished melody from before. But this time, she hummed along, her voice trembling but steady. When the last note faded, tears lined his face. "You sound like hope," he said. She smiled sadly. "You sound like a man starting to believe again." The next morning, while organizing the nursery room with Nora, Cassie found a framed photograph half hidden in a drawer, Ray holding a baby wrapped in a blanket. The child who didn't survive. Her hands shook as she held it. Nora noticed. "He never talks about them," she said softly. "You're the first person he's let into that room since the funeral." Cassie placed the photo gently on the crib. "He's still grieving," she murmured. Nora smiled knowingly. "And so are you." That evening, Ray walked into the nursery to find Cassie holding the photo. "What are you doing here?" he snapped, too sharply. I was I told you this room was off limits. His voice broke. You had no right. The words sliced through her. I wasn't trying to invade your past, Ray. I was trying to understand it. I don't want you to understand, he said, voice rising. I just want you safe and gone when this is over. Tears filled her eyes, but she stood her ground. You say that like it's possible, like you can turn off what's happening between us. There's nothing happening, he said harshly, but his voice cracked on the word nothing. She stared at him for a long moment, then whispered, Then why does it hurt so much when you say that? She walked out before he could answer. That night, Ray couldn't sleep. The storm outside echoed the chaos inside his chest. He replayed her words, her face, her tears. He went to the nursery, stood before the empty crib, and whispered, I'm sorry. It wasn't to Clara this time. It was to Cassie, to the woman who dared to touch the one place he'd vowed no one ever would. Down the hall, Cassie lay awake, her hand on her belly, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. She wanted to hate him for pushing her away, but her heart wouldn't listen. In the morning, she packed her things quietly. Nora found her at the door. You're leaving? I think it's best. Nora hesitated, then pressed a small wrapped box into her hand. He left this on the piano last night. Said it was for you. Inside was a music box that played the same melody he played with her. On the lid, engraved words shimmered. For the song you helped me finish. Her tears came freely now. Tell him thank you. If someone let you see the most painful part of their past, would you stay or walk away before it breaks you too? Comment below. Can love born from shared pain ever truly heal, or does it only remind us what we lost? For 2 days, Cassie stayed away from the Donovan estate. She told herself it was the right decision. She needed space, clarity, perspective. But by the 3rd night, she found herself replaying the melody from the music box again and again, tears soaking her pillow. At the same time, across the city, Ray sat in his office staring at an unsigned contract, the surrogacy's final clause. All he had to do was authorize the last payment. But he couldn't, because this was no longer about a contract. It was Nora who broke the silence. She showed up at Cassie's small apartment with a casserole and a look of quiet conspiracy. Mr. Donovan hasn't left his piano in 3 days, she said gently. He's not eating, he's not sleeping. Cassie sighed. He told me to go. Then maybe it's time you tell him you're not good at following orders. Cassie laughed softly, wiping her eyes. You sound like my best friend. Nora smiled. Good. Now get in the car. When Ray opened the door, his expression was shock, then guilt, then something softer. I shouldn't have yelled, he said before she could speak. That room, it's where I buried everything. And when I saw you there, I panicked. Cassie's eyes shimmered. I wasn't trying to take anything from you, Ray. I just wanted to understand the man behind all the walls. He stepped closer. And you did. That's the problem. They both laughed quietly at that. Sad, knowing laughter that felt like release. He gestured toward the piano. Sit with me? She nodded. This time, she started playing first, hesitant, gentle, as if asking permission. Ray joined in, his chords deep and steady beneath her melody. When they finished, she whispered, See? You're not broken. He looked at her, eyes glistening. Maybe I just needed the right song. Their hands lingered together on the piano keys. Neither moved. In the following days, Cassie didn't leave. Ray didn't ask her to. They spent mornings in the garden, afternoons reading by the window. One afternoon, she bent to touch the lavender bushes, smiling. My mom used to grow these, she said softly. Said they heal anything. Do they? She looked up at him. They're trying. He smiled, and for the first time in years, it reached his eyes. That evening, while watching the sunset, Cassie suddenly gasped. What's wrong? Ray asked, alarmed. She grabbed his hand and placed it on her belly. He kicked. Ray froze, feeling the faint thump beneath his palm. His eyes widened, his throat tight. That's incredible. Cassie laughed through tears. He's saying hello to his dad. Something in Ray's chest broke open, years of grief, guilt, loneliness, melting into a quiet, overwhelming love. "Hi, little one," he whispered, voice trembling. "I can't wait to meet you." When he looked up, Cassie was crying too. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. Later that night, they sat on the porch, a blanket draped over both their shoulders. Cassie broke the silence first. "Do you ever think some people are sent into our lives just to remind us we're still alive?" He smiled faintly. "I think some people walk in when we've forgotten how to breathe and make us do it again." She looked at him. "You make me feel like I belong somewhere again." He reached for her hand. "And you make me believe I still deserve something good." Their eyes met, and for the first time, there was no fear, only truth. The moment stretched between them, fragile as glass. Ray brushed a strand of hair from her face, his fingers trembling. "Cassie," he whispered. "Ray," she breathed back. But before the distance vanished, she pulled away. "This isn't right," she said softly. "I'm carrying your child. You hired me. You deserve something pure, not something messy." He smiled sadly. "Maybe love is supposed to be messy." "Maybe," she said, her voice shaking. "But I need to be sure it's real, and not just because of what we've shared." He nodded, pain in his eyes but respect in his silence. "I'll wait," he said simply. Before going to bed, she turned to him one last time at the stairs. "Ray." "Yes." "When this is over, when he's here, promise me one thing." "Anything." "Don't close yourself off again. Whether it's me or someone else, let someone love you." He stepped closer, gently touching her cheek. "It's already too late for that." Her breath caught, and for a moment she forgot how to move. "If you were in Cassie's place, would you protect your heart or risk everything for love that came in the wrong moment?" Comment below. Is timing more powerful than love, or can love rewrite the timing? For a few weeks, everything felt like peace. Too peaceful. Cassie spent her mornings journaling in the garden while Ray worked from his study. Sometimes they'd share breakfast, a smile, a passing touch. But beneath it all, a quiet tension lingered, something unspoken, waiting to snap. Then one morning, the world shifted. Ray was in his office when Mara entered with her usual efficiency, her tablet clutched tight. "You need to see this," she said quietly, setting it on his desk. The headline glared back at him. "Billionaire Ray Donovan expecting surrogate child. Sources reveal emotional entanglement with the mother." Beneath it, paparazzi photos. Cass in the garden, smiling, his hand on her belly. Ray's jaw tightened. "Who leaked this?" "We don't know yet," Mara said. "But the board is furious. They're questioning your judgment, your ethics." He slammed the tablet down. "Tell them I'll handle it." But in his chest, panic bloomed like wildfire. When he arrived home, Cassie was already there, holding her own copy of the article, her face pale. "I didn't know they were following me," she said, voice trembling. "I swear, Ray, I know," he cut in. "But the damage is done. The board wants distance. They think you're—" he hesitated. She flinched. "They think I'm what?" He exhaled. "That you're using this to get to me. To get money. Headlines." Her eyes filled with tears. "Is that what you think?" "Of course not," he said quickly. "But perception matters. I have to manage this." Cassie's voice broke. "Manage this? Manage me?" "Cassie, please. Just until this dies down. So you want me to disappear?" He hesitated too long. That was her answer. She set the magazine on the table. "I thought we were past pretending this was just business." "So did I," he whispered. "But I can't let them destroy everything I built." Her laugh was sharp, heartbroken. "Everything you've built? What about what we were building?" He didn't answer. She stepped back, tears sliding down her cheeks. "You know what hurts most, Ray? I actually believed you when you said you'd wait." Then she left, the sound of the door closing like a final note in their unfinished song. Days passed in suffocating silence. Ray threw himself into damage control, meetings, press statements, denial. But every word fell hollow. Every night, his empty house mocked him. Nora found him one evening, sitting at the piano, staring at the keys but not playing. She called. Nora said softly, "Just once. Asked how you were." He looked up sharply. What did you tell her? That you're miserable and stupid. Ray almost smiled. You're not wrong. Nora's expression softened. You can fix this, you know? Pride doesn't keep you warm at night. But he only whispered, it's not pride, Nora. It's fear. 3 weeks later, a phone call shattered what little calm remained. It was Dr. Lynn. Mr. Donovan, there's been an emergency. Cassie's in the hospital. Complications, stress-related. The baby's fine for now, but we need you here. Ray didn't even grab his coat. He ran. When he reached the hospital room, Cassie was lying pale against the sheets, monitors softly beeping. Her eyes fluttered open when she heard his voice. What are you doing here? Where else would I be? He whispered, gripping her hand. She didn't pull away, but her tone was cold. You made it clear what matters to you. I was wrong, he said, voice breaking. I was trying to protect what was left of my life. And in the process, I almost lost the only thing that makes it worth living. Tears slipped down her temples, silent and unrelenting. Why do you always wait until I'm breaking to say the right thing? Because I don't know how to say it when everything's fine, he confessed. I'm terrified of what you make me feel. Dr. Lynn entered quietly. The baby's okay, but she needs rest, emotional, physical. Stress could make things dangerous. Ray nodded, guilt carving into every word. When the doctor left, Cassie turned to him weakly. You don't get to be my comfort now, Ray. Not after you turn me into a headline. I'll fix it, he promised. Some things can't be fixed. He looked at her then, really looked, and saw not anger but exhaustion. He knew that if he didn't change now, he'd lose her forever. But before he could speak, she whispered, Please, just go. He hesitated, tears burning in his eyes. I love you, he said softly, the words almost breaking apart. She shut her eyes. Then prove it by letting me go. That night, the Donovan estate felt colder than ever. Ray walked through the halls in silence, every corner echoing her laughter. He stopped at the piano and opened the music box she left behind. The melody played softly, the same one they'd shared, and he whispered, I never should let you walk away. The sound of the rain outside blurred into the music, and for the first time in years, Ray Donovan cried. Have you ever loved someone so much you let them go just to keep them from getting hurt? Comment below. Is letting go an act of love, or the biggest mistake of all? The hospital released her 3 days later. She didn't go back to Ray's mansion. Instead, she moved into a small seaside rental 2 towns away, quiet, simple, anonymous. The sound of the ocean soothed her, but the silence hurt. She would sit on the porch, a blanket around her shoulders, one hand over her belly as waves rolled in like the heartbeat of something she wasn't ready to lose. Noah visited every weekend, trying to make her smile. You look sad, he said one afternoon, handing her a drawing. It was a stick figure family, her, Noah, the baby, and a tall man with dark hair. Who's that? She asked softly. The man who makes you smile different. Cassie's throat closed. You're too smart for your own good. I'm your brother, he said proudly. I know what love looks like. When he left, she sat by the window long after sunset, whispering to the baby. He's right, you know. I love him. I just don't know if loving him will break me again. Across the city, Ray's penthouse was spotless and empty, like a museum for a life that no longer existed. He hadn't touched the piano since that night. The company was running fine without him, but he felt like a ghost haunting his own success. One evening, Mara entered quietly with a folder. You're not even pretending to work anymore, she said softly. Why should I? He murmured. I built this empire to fill a void, and all it did was make the hole bigger. Mara hesitated, then placed an envelope on his desk. She sent this, said you should read it when you're ready. He stared at it for a long time after she left, then finally tore it open. Ray, I don't hate you. I never could. But I can't be where I'm just a reminder of what you've lost. You deserve a life that isn't built on guilt or pity, and I deserve love that isn't borrowed from grief. Still, thank you for showing me that my heart still works. I'll always carry a part of you, just like you'll always carry a part of me. Be kind to yourself. And if you ever wonder where I am, listen for the ocean. That's where I'll be. Love, Cassie. He read it twice, his tears falling freely. Then he looked out at the skyline, whispering to the wind. The ocean, huh? That night, Ray dreamed of Claire again, but not the way she used to appear, sad and silent. She was standing in sunlight this time, holding a baby, smiling at him. She's not taking your place, he told her. I know, her voice echoed softly. She's giving you back your heart. When he woke, the first thing he did was pack a small bag. The drive to the coast was long and full of thoughts he couldn't quiet. Every memory of Cassie replayed. Her laugh, her tears, her hand guiding his to feel their son's heartbeat. He arrived just as the sun began to set. The sky burned orange and gold, the air crisp with salt and hope. She was there, sitting on the porch, blanket around her shoulders, hair blowing in the wind. For a long moment, he didn't move, just watched her breathe, like a prayer he'd forgotten how to say. Then she turned and their eyes met. The confrontation. Ray, she whispered, rising slowly. I wasn't sure you'd still want to see me. I wasn't sure you'd come, she replied. He took a step closer. You said to listen for the ocean. So I did. She smiled faintly, eyes glistening. You always were dramatic. Only for things worth fighting for. Cassie crossed her arms, the wind tugging at her blanket. You hurt me, Ray. You made me feel like a scandal. I know, and I'll never forgive myself for that. I thought I was protecting you, but really I was protecting my fear. She looked away, blinking back tears. Fear of what? Of losing someone I love again. The words hung between them, fragile and final. He took another step forward, voice trembling. I love you, Cassie. Not because you carried my child, not because you healed my guilt, but because when I'm with you, I remember who I was before the pain. You make me want to live again. Her eyes filled. And what if I can't be what you need? You already are. She laughed softly through her tears. You always know what to say. No, he said, voice breaking. I just finally learned what's true. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of sea and promise. Cassie reached for his hand, hesitated, then placed it over her belly again. He felt another kick, stronger this time. He knows you, she whispered. Every time I think of you, he moves. Ray swallowed hard. Then I'll never stop giving him reasons to. She looked up at him, eyes wet and glowing in the fading light. Then stay, she whispered. He exhaled shakily, relief and love colliding all at once. Always. And when he kissed her, slow, tender, and trembling, it felt like the world exhaled with him. Would you forgive someone who broke your heart if they came back changed? Comment below. Does love deserve a second chance, or should some doors stay closed forever? A year later, the morning light poured through wide windows of a quiet seaside home, the same one that had once held Cassie's loneliness, now alive with laughter and warmth. Ray stood in the kitchen, barefoot, holding a small bottle in one hand and a baby monitor in the other. Operation Bottle Feed successful, he whispered to himself. Behind him, Cassie entered, her hair a sleepy mess, her smile soft. You're talking to yourself again. He turned, mock serious. When you're feeding a future CEO, you narrate everything. She laughed, a sound that still undid him every single time. In the cradle beside them, baby Liam stretched, tiny hands reaching for the light. Ray brushed a finger over his son's cheek. He looks like you. He has your stubbornness, she teased. He kicked every time I tried to sleep. They shared a look, that quiet, wordless gratitude that only people who've been through hell together can understand. A knock interrupted their moment. When Ray opened the door, Nora was there, her camera slung over her shoulder, grin wide. Permission to invade your domestic bliss? You always did anyway, Ray said, hugging her. Nora knelt beside the baby. Well, look at this little miracle. You two really did it. Cassie smiled shyly. We got lucky. Nora looked between them knowingly. No, you got brave. Later, when she left, she turned at the door. You know, Ray, for someone who swore off love, you're doing a terrible job of it. He smirked. Guess I finally made the right investment. A few weeks later, they gathered on the beach. Just a handful of friends, a sunset, and the ocean's rhythm. No grand wedding, no media frenzy. Just Ray, Cassie, and their vows whispered under open sky. I once thought love was something you could control, Ray said softly. But then you walked into my office, and suddenly nothing made sense anymore. You taught me that real love isn't perfect, it's brave. Cassie's eyes shimmered. And you taught me that I don't have to do everything alone, that it's okay to need someone, to want someone, even when it's terrifying. They exchanged rings, simple, silver, eternal. And as the waves touched their feet, Ray whispered, I love you. She smiled through tears. I know. I finally believe you. The guests applauded. But all Ray saw was her, the woman who turned his contract into a covenant, his loneliness into home. That night, after everyone left, they stood by the ocean, holding Liam between them. The water glowed under the moonlight, gentle and endless. Cassie looked up. Remember when you said everything you built was meaningless? Ray nodded. She smiled. You built this. He kissed her forehead. And I give away every dollar to keep it. The baby stirred, cooing softly, and Cassie leaned into Ray's chest. Do you think he'll ever know how much he was wanted? She whispered. Ray's voice cracked. He'll feel it every day. Later that night, after Cassie and Liam had fallen asleep, Ray walked out onto the porch. The ocean whispered below, the same sound that had once carried him here. He thought of the man he used to be, cold, guarded, broken. And then he looked inside, saw Cassie asleep with her child in her arms, and whispered, Thank you. As he turned back toward them, the wind lifted the corner of a framed photo on the wall, a simple image from their first family shoot. Beneath it, a folded piece of paper peeked out. It was the old surrogacy contract. Ray picked it up, smiled faintly, and tore it in half. Paper meant nothing now. Love had rewritten everything. Would you risk your heart again if love came when you least expected it? Comment below. Do you believe people can truly change when love finds them? Months later, as Liam took his first steps, Ray sat at the piano once more, this time with Cassie beside him. He began to play the melodies she once loved, the same one that filled his mansion with ghosts. Now it was alive again. Cassie rested her head on his shoulder. You're playing it right this time. He smiled. Because I finally know how it ends. And together, under a sunset that promised forever, they played until the music faded into laughter. Proof that love, no matter how unexpected, always finds its way home.